Hey good people, today we're taking a deep dive into a different kind of 6-string bass. Rather than what has become the standard tuning of a low B to a high C, that'd be a B-E-A-D-G-C, this breed of bass is tuned E to E like a guitar, but an octave lower. In this video we're going to take a look at the history of the instrument, are they baritone guitars, who makes them today, and why you might prefer a custom build like this Kiesel. So here's a quick history. Only a few years after Leo Fender introduced the precision bass in 1951, Danelectro produced the UB2 6-string bass. The 30-inch scale was shorter than the standard 34-inch scale bass, and it had a really distinct tone, much brighter than the precision bass. A few years later, Gibson entered the fray with their semi-acoustic EB6. Fender answered in 1961 with the Bass 6. Fender's version picked up traction and was seen being used by the Beatles, John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin, and Jack Bruce of Cream. By the 70s, boutique builders were focusing on extending the range of the bass guitar, and Carl Thompson created the first B to C contrabass for Anthony Jackson in 1975. Now those early E to E 6-string basses looked a lot more like guitars. With a shorter 30-inch scale, they were clearly aimed at guitarists turned bassist, or a guitarist that occasionally had to fill in on bass, like John Lennon or George Harrison of the Beatles. So, is an E to E tuned short scale bass really a baritone guitar? No way. Baritone guitars are usually tuned a fourth lower than a standard guitar tuning, so that'd be B-E-A-D, F-sharp B, not an octave lower like a bass, and they're usually around 27-inch scale. And although they were popular with 60s surf music, they've seen a huge resurgence in the metal scene. All the major string manufacturers make strings for the E to E 6-string basses, and the gauges are usually somewhere between 24 and 90. I use a custom set of Stringjoy strings for this Kiesel bass, gauged 26 to 95. So who makes these basses today? Well, the Ibanez SRC6 is a modern take on this instrument with a 28 to 30 multi-scale neck. You can still purchase the Fender Custom Shop Bass 6, but there's a more affordable Squire Classic Vibe Bass 6 as well. Eastwood makes a couple, the TB64 with an old school Bigsby whammy bar, as well as the Hooky bass. Schecter is in on the game too with the Hellcat bass, and I'm pretty sure Music Man made a Silhouette 6-string bass, but I don't think they're in production anymore. If I've left one out, let me know in the comments, I'd like to know. I'll place links to all these basses in the description. So what about string spacing? If you're looking at these and thinking they all look a lot like a guitar, you're right. All of these basses have a string spacing very similar to a guitar, and if you're playing with a pick, it's probably not a problem. But if you're wanting to play fingerstyle, it can be really hard to adjust to that tighter string spacing. For that reason, my first E to E bass was an Ibanez GVB that I converted from a B to C 6-string bass to an E to E 6-string bass. The conversion worked fine, but the scale was a little bit too long for the higher strings. Here's a link to a cover of Sarah Smile I performed with that bass. You have to be really careful with the string gauge selection on the high B and E strings, because they can end up being too tight and too bright. They're also too tight for bending strings, and I broke a few E strings. That's why manufacturers make these basses in a 30-inch scale. So in my quest to find the perfect E to E bass with larger string spacing, I had Kiesel make this custom Vader bass. Here's a link to a video I did covering Chris Isaac's Wicked Game using this bass. It's a ton of fun to play, and I much prefer the standard string spacing. I also prefer the more bass-like tones you can get out of a bass like this, but I'd love to try out one of the ones we've talked about today. So we've come a long way from the classic E to E tuned 6-string basses of the 60s to the more modern ones that you can get today. Do you have a preference? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. More to come on these in future episodes. As always, I appreciate you watching. Please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.